podcast. I'm joined today by, I believe, retired IFBB pro Chris Tuttle. I was just mentioning to him before we got on, I've watched a lot of his stuff over the years through Animal's YouTube page as well as Universal's YouTube page, which I'll check out at some point. I'm going to hop right into this with you. So, Chris, introduce yourself, a little bit of your background. And something that I always like to hear from people is what is kind of your fitness journey, like how you started just working out, and then also how you got into the industry.
Okay, yeah. So I could talk forever, so I'll keep it as brief and then I'll let you pick apart the questions from there. All right. So my name is Chris Tuttle. I'm an IFB pro. We're retired. We competed in 212. My last competition season was 2019. Decided to retire in 2020 just to move on to other things. I want to experience other things in my life. I did bodybuilding for a long time and I figured, you know what? I'd like to learn how to box. I just want to do more of what life has to offer. I'm a dietitian. I have a master's in nutrition. I run an online business with my wife at home. I recently started this company, More Hydration, which is a mineral-based flavor water enhancer. My wife and I both also do Tuttle Equity, which is like basically purchasing of apartment complexes and buildings, investments. I just recently started also posing module, which is going to be like a subscription basis where people can log on. And I'm teaming up with a very, very well-known individual who's going to bring a lot of spice to that and help me cover all other categories as well. So it's going to become like a live feed subscription basis, posing seminar, individuality, individual component, cover the whole nine. Also starting a training module as well, trying to offer more of my information, things I've used over the years. I diet people all across the world, competition, but because I'm a dietitian, I cover nutrition-related disease. I have diabetics. I have people who've gastric bypass, everything. But typically at this point in time, no longer accepting new clients. I just usually have the clients I have as I'm working on other business ventures. I still have a full plate of clients, but as they fall off, I'll take more. But that's generally it. I work from home with my 5 dogs. I live in Texas. I recently moved from Connecticut to here, never going back ever. The second I moved here, I realized, I told my wife after 6 months of being here, I'm like, I never thought about Connecticut once since I've been here. Not once. Usually when you grow up somewhere, you're like, I miss home. I miss this. Nothing. Zero. So now I just bodybuild 3 days a week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. As in weight train like a bodybuilder. And then the other 4 days is just rollerblading, mountain biking, boxing. I stay in shape. I'm like 209 right now, 211. I stay really lean for boxing and not to mention just less wear and tear in your body being lighter. Very into nutrition and health. Like I live, eat, breathe nutrition. So I still weigh and measure my food. I still cycle vegetables. I make fresh vegetable medleys. I cook all fresh vegetables. Very into nutrition to my core. Now, the synopsis of how I got to where I am. It all started with being diagnosed with being hypoglycemic when I was a kid. And I noticed that the certain foods I ate affected me a certain way. So as kids are eating combos and chips for lunch or just whatever they can get their hands on, I always called it real food. I wanted a sandwich. I wanted something which I didn't know at the time, a mixed meal, proteins, carbs, fats, because I felt better. So that's my first introduction to nutrition and understanding carbs, fats, and proteins around 7 years old, 8 years old. Then I was racing motocross at that time. I did turn professional when I was 2004. But prior to that, I got a motocross trainer. And my trainer came into my house and dumped all his garbage out of the house. He's like, if you want to be a champion, you can't eat any of this garbage. So at 11 years old, he was throwing away all the candy, the junk, the soda. And he taught me how to eat mixed meals. That's what he called them. Carbs, proteins, fats, relatively equal intervals through the day. Protein, protein, protein. It's got to have good protein. So moderate protein diet, complex carbohydrates, whole foods, all the things we know now. And that's where I initially learned nutrition and how well it made me change. He also put me on a weight training program. It was more like CrossFit style. And my body responded like that. And I started to see these muscles, even though I wasn't training for bodybuilding. And then I started to become interested in bodybuilding from motocross. My trainer's like, you can't do that. Motocross and lifting weights, that's like trying to be a sumo wrestler and be your fastest time in a marathon. You can't do that. So reframing from that, but I always snuck in some arm curls here and there and did some stuff. When I finished racing motocross, I went right to go to school to become a dietitian. And during that time, what a better time than to learn about nutrition and start bodybuilding. And I went right into bodybuilding. And that's kind of how I got into the fitness world. I never wanted to be professional. I never wanted to do what I'm doing now. I never inspired to be. I knew I love nutrition. I want to learn more about it. I knew I liked bodybuilding. And then one thing led to the next. I do well in that show, I go to the next show. That will do well in that show, go to the next show. Got my dietitian job. People asked me to help them. I helped them, and then their friend asked me to help them, and then it just pluttered into what it is today.
Awesome. I had a bunch of questions I wanted to ask. Some of what you talked about kind of leads right into that. I am curious how your journey, I guess, from when you were at college or university, and you turned pro in 2013, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. What was that journey like from when you first started competing in bodybuilding to the time that you turned a pro? Because you hear about some guys, like I think I saw last year, especially in classic, because I think guys don't get outsized. You see some people where they get their pro card their first prep. And then there's guys like John Meadows that, grinded away for well over a decade. So I'm just curious what your kind of path looked like.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, first off, it's much easier to turn pro today than it was years ago. Way easier. For one, they used to only give out pro cards for the winner of each class at nationals. And then at USA's, it was only the top 2 or top 3 in the overall. North Americans, it was only the top overall. And there was no classic. So now you have classic giving pro cards for like, I think up to 6 shows a year. And they give like pro cards at the second place. And the only thing I tell people, pro card might be cool, but if you're winning your pro card, your first prep, there's a 99% chance you're going to be a terrible pro. And it's not because you don't have potential to be a pro. It just means that you're given your card too early. Because if you had to work 8 years to get a card, think of the muscle maturity that accumulates in that time. Just like way back in the day when it was almost impossible to get a pro card, dudes would get their pro card and then all of a sudden place top 8 in Olympia next year because they've been an amateur for 15 years, right? So when I first started bodybuilding, and this is the thing that mentality today I don't understand of younger people, because I know we live in an entitled, want results yesterday type mentality now. Like society has become more of that. So is I did individual sports my entire life, so I understand what it's like to lose. I understand how long things take. So just like when I started racing motocross, I was never like, I want to be professional, be Ricky Carmichael, Jeremy McGrath. I was like, I just want to race. And then you race, and then you're like, oh man, I can't wait to get top 5. Then you get top 5, then you're like, I want to win. Then you win, and then you're like, oh shit, maybe if I win a few more races, I can move up to the amateur class, and then I move up to the next class. And then before you know it, each step led to the next step. So I never was too far ahead of myself like people are today. So when I first started bodybuilding, I just wanted to compete. I didn't give a crap about sponsorship. Wasn't following anybody, nor did I care what anybody was doing. I just wanted to improve myself. I wanted to compete. Did my first show, got crushed. I had a coach at the time, which coaching wasn't a thing in 2004 or 2005. It really wasn't. It was more like, who do you know that has competed? And then can they give me some advice? Right. Kind of thing. Or, all right, dude, just give me a couple $100 and I'll just hand write you something on a piece of paper, legitimately write on a piece of paper. And the next day I give the piece of paper back and he crosses off a few things and he file a piece of paper back and I go back and do more cardio. That was prep coaching back in the day. And after the first show, I was like, man, this is really interesting. Like, I really liked it. I want to do it again because I only had inclination to do it once. I bought all Chris Aceto's books, all his championship guide to bodybuilding, and I read his books like 4 or 5 times and followed it to a T. And that following year, I came back 13 pounds heavier stage weight, better condition, and then won the novice overall. And I took second in the open light heavyweight, where my first show, I got dead last in the middleweight with poor condition. And then I did another show, third show, got second in the open light heavyweight again. So then I'm like, you know what? This is really cool. I learned a lot. I'm going to compete again. at a different show. I wanted to do another show and win an overall. And that year I got third, and then I did a really competitive show and I got spanked. So at that point in time, I'm like, man, I don't know what mistake I made because I'm doing it myself. So I was like, I gotta find somebody to help me. So I saw a judge, which happened to be Fakhri Mubarak. And I'm like, fuck. I'm like, excuse me, sir. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I'm Chris. Nice to meet you. He's like, I'm Fakhri. I'm like, yeah, I saw that you were a judge. Um, and I didn't, like I said, coaching wasn't a thing. There wasn't anybody advertising coaching. So I was like, hey, can I pay you to help me? He said no. He's like, what do you mean pay you to help me? I'm like, can you like teach me what you know? Because I just don't want to make 10 years of mistakes to get, if somebody's already done this and walked the walk. I want to learn from them. And he's like, no, I don't do that. And I'm like, okay. So like a week later, somehow my girlfriend at the time found him on MySpace and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
messaged him on MySpace, and we asked him again, like, hey, can you help me? I met you at the show. And then he finally goes, okay, fine. I'll help you. 500 bucks. I think it was like 500 bucks, 600 bucks. And I'll help you. It was like for 6 months. And he wrote me this diet, this training, and I followed everything. And what is crazy is November, year was that shit? November 2008, November 2007, I competed. Okay. And I got smoked in that competitive show. June 2008, I jumped a whole weight class, which ended up being 8 pounds heavier in that 6 months or 7 months with lights out condition, and then won the heavyweight open heavyweight with the help of Fakhri. And after that, I was like, dude, this is great. I learned so much. Like he had me eating way more food, training differently, so much he opened my eyes to, which was such a good learning experience. And that's kind of like how it kicked off. But from that point, after winning the open, I was like, I want to win it overall. And then I went on to compete a couple more times, still didn't get an overall. Didn't do very well at junior nationals. And at that point, I'm like, I was in college. I got to start focusing on my school. So I quit bodybuilding 2009 and just finished my internship, became a dietitian, got all that squared away. And when I got back, I was kind of just bored and wanted to compete in something. Did a strongman show just for fun. I did well. I won my strongman class, which was below 230. And then I jumped into a show prep in like 11 weeks. And then I won 2 overalls back to back as a heavyweight. And then I was going to quit bodybuilding forever. I was done. And then my buddy's like, bro, you've never done like a pro qualifier before. You should probably do one. And I'm like, no, dude, bodybuilding's done. I got to grow up. I got to do other things. And this was 2012. He's like, dude, just do it once. You're going to regret it. I'm like, you're probably right. I'll give it a shot. So I decided to do North Americans. And my goal is just to get top 10. I'm like, I was get top 10. These guys are no joke at these national shows, And I ended up getting 5th. And again, I quit. I'm done. That was over. But one of the key things about North Americans, which is a funny story, is usually when you get last call out, you don't ever get a recomparison, right? So I got last call out because I was late getting down there, which is a whole other story. Didn't have oil on. So I was in the last lineup. I didn't even do my routine, my individual routine. Steve Weinberger calls the top 10 out. I mean, the last like 8, 9 guys, immediately puts me in the middle, does 4 poses, and goes, everybody file off except number 101. And then he calls back out the top 8, but excludes the top 2. And then recompares all of us. And then we get off. And then nobody's ever seen that before. Like, Steve doesn't do that. That's weird. They must have seen something in your physique. So anyways, ended up getting 5th. I walk off stage. David Bay works for muscle development. He's like, dude, I got to interview you. I got a hold of Evan Senapani. He gave me your number. Can I interview you? I'm like, yeah, what's this about? He's like, oh, you think you got a great physique. Let me come talk to you. Comes, talks to me. He's like, dude, so what's next? You can do nationals? I'm like, no, bro, I quit. I'm done bodybuilding. He's like, what do you mean? You just got 5th. He goes, arguably, you could have been top 2. He's like, why didn't you have tan on or oil for prejudging? I'm like, it's another story. I don't want to get into it. And then Falkery talked to Steve, and Steve's like highly suggests that I do nationals, which is like 3 months later. And then so I called Evan, and Evan's a good friend of mine. I asked him, I'm like, dude, do you think I should? He's like, well, you're already lean. You might as well. I'm like, dude, I got a fucking cruise booked. It's 7 weeks out. Like, I
Yeah.
can't not go. My ex-wife at the time, my ex-wife now, my wife at the time hated bodybuilding. And I'm like, dude, I don't know if I could pull this off. But regardless, long story short, I did. I was like, fuck it. I'll just do one more show and that's it, just for Waha, and then quit. And then I ended up winning. And then when I won, I'm like, oh, it's cool. Maybe I'll just compete as a pro just once. And then 5 months, 6 months after turning pro, Universal Animal contacted me for a potential sponsorship. They're like, hey, would you be willing to be a part of our team? Can you drive down to New Jersey? We can interview you. And then that's how everything kind of unfolded. It was not on purpose. It wasn't like comparing myself to all these other people. I wasn't, I was competing for me, you know?
Mm.
And that's one mentality today that which I don't understand, because I know I didn't grow up in a social media era, because social media is all about, you know, validity from other people and looking like something and comparing yourself to other people, which luckily I never ever did. So there's never any like pressure. You know what I mean? Just having fun. And that's kind of how it ended up rolling out. It just everything just kind of unfolded as it did by based on me just doing what I love to do.
I think that's the thing that's really interesting. I think there's a lot of validity to. I think the pro card thing, I don't know how else to say this. It's almost like become like this meme. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And I get it. Like a pro card is a big deal. It is a big accomplishment. Um, but it feels like that's this all or nothing thing. Uh, Not even necessarily like their training is revolved around just loving training, like the way that it sounds like it was for you. And there's this rush to turn pro. It's got to happen fast, 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 right? And it has to happen fast because they want the recognition, they want maybe the sponsorships. Like I get it, there's money in it and stuff like that. What's interesting about your story, is obviously there's just kind of this underlying love for training and nutrition and self-improvement and stuff like that. But I wonder how much, almost in a sense, you having like a foot out the door the whole time, and you weren't stressed about it. How many people's preps crash and burn because they are absolute like nutcases for 15 or 20 weeks? And it sounds, maybe I'm wrong here, but it sounds like there was this pressure that you didn't put on yourself. And I wonder how much that had a positive influence on your competitive history.
Well, no, you're 100% right. And what you're believing, what you just said is 100% accurate with everybody. Because I'll tell you right now, I last year I dieted 96 people for shows. And I can tell you across the board, when I get somebody and I start to know them, I already know they're going to do well or not
Mm.
based on the things they say and how they think and operate. When I get a guy who's just super smooth, easygoing, go with the flow, this dude's going to kill prep with like very little cardio and a lot of food. And then when the person who's like, dude, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to eat dog shit. If you tell me to eat dog shit, I just want to win. I'm going to crush them. Very competitive. They're probably not going to do very well because they're
Interesting.
just full throttle all the time. And that's not how this works.
Yeah.
But I know from motocross, like when I'm nervous at the starting gate, and I'm making errors. If I'm calm and relaxed, I'm going to be riding like I do in practice. But like if I'm at the starting gate and I'm nervous and I'm at the whole shot and we start and I'm like not coming into corners too hot, not leaning the bike over, you know, not just your motor patterns, your ability to move it becomes compromised. But you're 100% right, because I had pressure on myself after I won Atlantic States, the open heavyweight. I had a lot of people like tell me shit like, dude, you got a good physique. You could probably do well at a bigger show. You should do it. So I'm like, man, like I've got to meet those expectations. And honestly, that junior nationals prep was terrible. And I didn't look good at all. And then when I didn't give a shit and I did Jay Cutler in the other two shows, I got in shape fast. And then same thing with nationals. And USA, North Americans and nationals. Like, I mean, those are pretty brutal preps in retrospect to compared to how I prep myself now, but um, it got easier and easier. I mean, like, and then the last show that I did no cardio. I did no T3. I hardly used Clen, and body fat was pissing off me like crazy because I didn't give a shit. I don't want to say give a shit like it's whatever. I don't care. It's I just meant when I say I don't give a shit. I mean, I had zero pressure. Like, I know the drill. I know how to train. I know when to push. I know when to back off. And when you do that, you sleep better, you recover better, your digestion's better, you're not constipated, and your whole system processes in your body just works. And you burn body fat through the entire prep like you do the first 3 weeks of prep. And a lot of people get to a stagnant point, but like if you play your cards right, you manage fatigue and sleep, it should continuously go like that forever if you do it right. But I see it with my clients, I see it myself. But it's 100%. And dude, I love the lifestyle. Like, people look at me now, they're like, bro, why are you so lean? Like, dude, it's easy for me. Like, I still weigh my food every day. I still eat very, very clean. If somebody saw me eat and pack my meals, they're like, getting ready for a show. I'm like, no, this is how I eat. It's not because I need to look a certain way. It's because I feel good. It makes me happy. I love slicing up my food, my vegetables the night before and air frying this. And I prepare my wife's breakfast and dinner every day forever. That's just, I'm the cook in the house. I love nutrition. I love lifestyle. And people keep being like, you should compete again. I'm like, I didn't really enjoy the competing process as much as I love the training and nutrition and what you can do to your body through nutrition and training. That's exciting to me. But like getting on stage and shaving and slapping tan on yourself with little skivvies, not exactly like looking forward to that, you know?
Yeah, a lot of what you were saying there is really relatable. So I'm actually going through my first prep right now. So I compete 12 days from now.
Oh, nice.
So I had a background in powerlifting. So I'd competed, in strength sports and other sports before that. Funny enough, I first dieted down because I competed at the end as a 275 in powerlifting. And I was pretty burnt out, just like injuries. And I found being heavier wasn't super fun.
Oof, brutal.
Yeah, like I'm I'm not even like I'm 5'10" when I was 275 and powerlifting 275, so you're kind of fat. Um, so I had first dieted down summer of 2020 just to kind of feel better, change of pace. And then I was like, ooh, this is like a lot of fun. And that kind of got this idea of bodybuilding in my head because like challenging myself, like competition. And I, in 2020, was like, I think I'm going to compete in bodybuilding. And I took a step back and was like, well, in order to show up the way that I'd want to, I think I need 2 or 3 years. So I've basically, like, this is the culmination of actually 3 years of planning for it. I did a photo shoot last year just to run like a mock prep. Um, but it's interesting. Everything smooth sailing, it's gone really, really well. And then what you were saying, because there's this point where even if you've been dieting for 10 weeks, nobody notices because you're like flat but kind of fat and you don't look that impressive.
Yeah.
But there's this point where you're like, ooh, like that guy's like kind of vascular or whatever. And then maybe 4 or 5 people in the last month or so, people notice and you're competing. So I'm doing a show. There's a small town called Sudbury. Um, and then the following weekend is the Toronto Pro Qualifier and Pro Show. So the idea was to do those two, like the Sudbury show and then potentially the qualifier, just to sort of see. Um, and people go, "Oh, like you don't have your pro card?" And I was like, "Oh, fuck!" And I never. I was like, you know what? I just want to. I was like, if I qualify, um, just for the second show, I'm happy. Like everything after that, I don't really care. Like I just want to do the best that I can. And it's weird, those voices from other people, and I'm like, oh fuck, like, 3 or 4 people already think I am a pro. And then it's like, well, now I got it. And it's this weird thing. And that is the point where the last couple of weeks of my prep, body fat's come down because nobody violates energy and energy out. But the amount of water fluctuation from stress and this other stuff has been all fucking over the map. But it's been like a really weird experience. So I had kind of my last high day yesterday, 2.5 pounds lighter. Just like this reduction in cortisol. Anyway, so all this being like, as soon as there was this pressure from other people, it did kind of change like my body's response a little bit, which has been really fascinating. Which leads me into some of the questions that I wanted to ask you. So obviously, I think anybody who's a good coach recognizes that there's going to be different approaches depending on the individual. You're going to auto regulate, decisions that you're going to make based on the situations that they're in. So what I wanted to do is maybe run through a couple of scenarios, setting some conditions, and then the types of decisions you might make for that individual. Cool.
Yeah.
So the first thing, and this is kind of selfish because this is the position that I'm in, because I'm competing in classic. I imagine obviously you've classic guys. I know you compete in 212, so you have the weight cap.
Yeah.
So I wanted to look at two scenarios. So for people who have to make a weight cap, let's start with the situation that I'm in, where body fat is more or less as low as you can get it, maybe a pound or two, and that person's over the weight cap. What would you, and let's say, a week, 2 weeks out, something like that, what might you start to implement in order to get them to be able to make that weight? And like, how would your strategies change?
Well, the first question is the weigh-in the night before or the morning of the show?
Night before.
Which is a terrible. It's one.
I know.
Yeah. Two, how high are you above the weight cap?
So I have to weigh in at 205. I anticipate I'll be 217 tomorrow morning, 219 this morning.
Oh, so you're significantly above that weight cap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if you are truly peeled at that point in time, I'm having that dude do bodybuilding, to be honest with you. If this was a morning time weigh-in, that gives you more wiggle room, because the problem is that means you have to restrict all day Friday.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to refeed probably over 5 meals and carefully reintroduce water, which is a disaster. So nobody's going to look their best when they do that. So speaking of, I would first honestly look at the individual's drugs, right?
Yeah.
Are they using testosterone? Are they using growth? Well, growth would be out.
Yeah.
Looking at their testosterone, say if they're on 1,000 mgs a test a week at that point, I would probably bring it down to like 400. If they were on 500 test, I'd probably drop it out completely. If they were running tren, say greater than 50 milligrams every other day, I would probably bring it down to 33 milligrams every day, or even less, maybe even 20 milligrams every day. I'd probably just keep master on maybe 50 milligrams ED and then run orals. But I would probably have made that change at 2.5 weeks out. And then in severe cases, I would just run orals the last full 14 days to get rid of the body's excess water. Because at that point in time, dude, like, you got to look at yourself, what's better, right? You have the idea of, well, I need to keep the gear in because I have to look full. I got to maintain that roundness. I got to maintain my training performance. But obviously, as everybody knows, gear affects how your kidneys handles water. You're going to hold more fluid in general, regardless if you're on a bunch of AIs, it doesn't matter. And then you're like, restrict food hard and water. But we've all been in situations where people should have, where you're on hardly no gear at all, and you're lean and you eat and you look insanely awesome. So I've been in situations before where people were just on 75 mgs of orals only for like 3 weeks. And then I gave them more food and they look way better because now that cortisol's rinsed off, their body fatigue's down. They have nothing going in, but just a little bit of oral androgens that are keeping their muscle mass intact. Last leg day might be 10 to 14 days out to ensure their legs are flushing out all that excess fluid. Water intake would be deadly consistent because you got to watch everything every day. So it'd be like, I would say sleep schedule's got to be exactly the same every day. Water intake's got to be exactly the same every day. Salt intake the same every day. At that point, I wouldn't even do high and low days. It would be a steady diet every day and making my changes every 48 hours based on that baseline diet because I can't have these fluctuations at that point because I have to know what he looks like, how he performs, and what his weight's going to be. And then as you get a hold on your weight with those variables, then you can be like, well, I feel all right. Let me try to knock down some of these carbohydrates and create a little more depletion and maybe add some of those calories back to make sure I stay fueled, or just keep your carbohydrates around training to fuel you. But you got to really manage fatigue. In the drugs would be the first thing I try to manipulate, but that's really hard. Now, as far as making weight, some of the scenarios you're going to have to run possibly is lower the protein. And most people don't understand and realize that when you lower protein, you lose a lot of water. When I bring protein way down, usually lasts like 4 days. Say they're eating 250 grams, and I bring them all the way down to like 185, 175, and I bring some carbohydrates back in. They're like, oh my God, this is, oh my God, I can't, why are you jumping your protein? And the next day they're down like 4 pounds. And they're like,
Oh,
what is going on? I can't tell you why. It's something that I see with practically every single one of my clients. It doesn't mean you're going to drop your protein, you're just going to drop a bunch of weight. But I'm saying during the carb process, when I lower my protein way, way down and I give them a little bit of carbs back, probably the combination of that adding carbs back and reducing the calories lift the protein, kind of, they get uplifted for more carbohydrates. They might move more. Carbohydrates help lower the cortisol, lower protein. Your body just digests food better. You probably maybe move bowels a little better. And they usually lose weight. I might even implement Colace, stool softener, 7 days out. And then maybe start doing 1 Ducalax a day, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. I don't like introducing anything new the day before. So that's why I would start at 3 days to test tolerance. So at least bowels would be moving and emptying fully, because that's a lot of weight. So you could probably scrape off at least maybe 5 pounds from gear and shit and, keeping things moving before you'd have to restrict. But if you're restricting greater than 5 pounds the last 24 hours, it's not going to end well. For a young guy,
yeah.
for sure. But older guys, they're just not going to bounce back. And especially you're weighing in at night and then having to go tan and then get food and then take pictures and you're stressed. It's tough.
Oh yeah, I've talked to a few people too, and I think to like most people's satisfaction, I've already made the call. Like after this year, it'll just be men's bodybuilding. Um,
And you notice I didn't say diuretics. And
yeah.
diuretics are terrible to make weight. I know people are going to be like, oh, I do it. I think it's stupid because majority of my clients, anybody who's seen my clients these last 2 years, I bring guys in really, really good condition. And 99% of the time, I don't use any diuretics at all. It's just
Okay. I'm
they're ready 7 days out. I manipulate, when they're ready, you're ready. And then most of the time, I don't even cut water the day of the show either. But diuretics are a risky business. It's a whole different approach. It's not the approach I take. But when it comes to making weight, diuretics are a mistake because you're going to take a diuretic to create excess urination, excess sodium loss in the urine. And then now you got to put it back. And then
yeah.
you got to put it back in a short time after restricting fluid. That's a disaster. If it's in a controlled setting where maybe weigh-in was Friday morning and you could duplicate a trial run Wednesday or Thursday, sure. But to do that on a Friday night weigh-in, I just think that's flirting with disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like
Um,
diuretics.
yeah, it's funny, and you see like wildly differing approaches when it comes to the water manipulation, diuretics in particular. I'm a really, really big fan of John Jewett, and
100%. Yeah, 100%.
uh, like 90% of the way done his J3U course. And yeah, one of the things I really like about him, everyone treats peak, I shouldn't say every, a lot of people treat peak week like it is this magical moment and you're going to be out of shape and somehow you're going to like eat a cheeseburger the night before your show and then come in peeled or some weird stuff like that. Um, which logically doesn't make any sense. A lot of the time, like our body doesn't like drastic change
No,
and
100%.
and it becomes unpredictable, right? So um anyway, so I it sounds like your mentality is very similar to his in that be fat free and then do the things that keep your body kind of steady.
100%. Dude, John and I talk quite a bit. The 100%. I love though when like, one thing I do like, and you'll gain this more experience too with you if you prep people all the time is you start to form a belief and see a pattern, and then you talk to somebody else like John and they see the same thing. You're like, yes, somebody else sees the same shit I see. And then you're like, do we become best friends? And
Yeah.
then you start to like feed off each other because you're like, wow, you're finding that too, I've asked them so many questions over the years. I remember like last year, construction workers, nighttime workers. Like, bro, you ever have problems getting night shifters in shape? He's like, bro, it's like almost impossible. I'm like, fuck, man. It's like they get like 4 hours of sleep or they get 2 hours, like sporadic broken sleep during the day because they have to be up with their kids and they work night shift. I'm like, getting them in contest prep shape unless genetics is on their side is almost impossible because their body's constantly out of their hormones are whacked, stress is high. It's just a disaster. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, am I doing something wrong here?
Curious then, I guess like other things that you see commonly in people's contest preps, the use of refeed meals or like a refeed day versus cheat meal, because I do think that they're different. Um, versus maybe just running the same baseline diet, um, maybe a little bit higher to account for the extra calories you might have at a refeed. Do you have sort of a strategy you like implementing? Is that kind of person to person dependent?
Yep. So 95% of my clients will have a higher carbohydrate day that it was obviously formulated based on and progresses based on what they were dieting with to begin with, right? I will have already formulated and found their baseline calories by 16 weeks out, meaning I know what it takes at that point to make them tip low. I know what it takes for them to maintain their performance. So that's usually right off the rip will be the amount of their first high day. And then I'll remove calories to their new baseline. And I pull that old baseline plan and put it in my back pocket. And then I run the new baseline, which is in a calorie deficit from that maintenance for a while, see how their body responds, and, maybe 7 to 10 days, maybe 14 days until I see the weight I want to see come down and or that fatigue comes in. Yeah, I'm feeling a little tired, a little flat. Oh, you're down 3.5 pounds in 10 days. That's really good. Let's bring the baseline diet from before back in for one day and remove cardio in those 2 days. Don't train on that high day. And let's see how your body responds with your weight and your look. And obviously, if their weight goes up 2 or 3 pounds, they feel great. Oh, I feel great. I feel refreshed. Sweet. Back to our baseline low calories. If they run it and they lose weight again, because that happens, right? Well, run another high day, please. Run another one of those days. Keep off the cardio until I see that scale kind of go up. And if it doesn't, I'll bring them back down to the low fat baseline and then take that original high baseline and add more carbohydrates to it for the next time. And then that's how my high days work for my guys. It will just progress like that through prep based on their weight before and after that high day and whether that high day or high days, 2 or 3, rinse off that fatigue. But they might end at 100 grams of carbs per meal at the end, 3 weeks out because everything's going so fast, or they might be lower. But regardless, the point of those high days is to manage that fatigue, to bring some energy back, get them moving again, etc. I don't like doing cheat meals because it's not measurable and it's usually not enough. And it's usually just a bunch of high fat food. Because let's be honest, cheat meals, contrary to popular belief, is fat. When people see a burger and fries, they're like, bro, it's got protein and carbs. I'm like, the dominant macro most of the time is fat. They're using 80% ground beef, which is basically more fat or the same or more fat of grams of fat per ounce than protein. Then you're adding cheese. Then you're cooking it on a griddle with butter. Then you're putting butter on the bun. Then you're having French fries. Then you're having, Chipotle dip in your French fries. Like you're just loading fat calories, in which my opinion in prep is relatively useless. Not really my primary focus on bringing glycogen stores back and such, So I don't do cheat meals. I will do cheat meals sometimes to people that in the beginning, like, hey man, we're starting our diet 18 weeks out. You get to have a meal off plan consistent with this, or this. I'll give them choices. And then as long as you're progressing and this is working, we're keeping it. If it's not, and I'm seeing digestive issues or you looking weird 2 days after your cheat meal, I'm pulling them. So sometimes that gives them incentive to be like, all right, I'm not going to get the Chicago deep dish, which you shouldn't anyway. You should be getting something more suitable, But that's how I run it. I don't think they're useful. Yeah, I know there's a lot of coaches out there, in my opinion. I mean, no disrespect to them, but the whole slam the T3 cleanse, cardio, zero carbs, and then feed them hard wherever you want for 2 hours and then repeat. It's just like throw the kitchen sink at it and see what sticks to the wall. It might work for 50% of people, but it's not going to work for everybody. And it just seems very unorganized to me.
So you've actually touched on it a couple times. Implementing fat loss agents in a contest prep. So like you said, cleanse probably the most common, or at least the most well known. Something like Clen, T3. I know GH obviously has lipolytic properties as well. What else have people, like injectable L-carnitine, yohimbine? Like how useful do you think those are as tools? How readily would you be like willing to implement that into a prep?
I think Clen is by far the most useful.
Okay.
By far. And honestly, majority of my clients never use T3. The vast majority of them don't. Back in the day, it was just a staple protocol, start with 25 and advance to 50 and then 75 and all this madness. And now people just will use T3 to replace their normal thyroid function, at 25 micrograms and T4. But don't really implement those too much because your body is adaptive, So your body eventually will adapt to it. And if you're pushing your body into the ground, 25, 35, 37.5 or 50 micrograms of T3 is not going to do much if you can't sleep and all this other things are going on. But Clen for sure is the most useful tool. And one of the things I think is more useful over, say, like an ECA stack is doesn't have the same central nervous system stimulation as those. So like ECA stack might keep somebody awake a little more than Clen, even though Clen has a longer half-life. It just doesn't have that same level of central nervous system stimulation after like 7 to 10 days. It wears off a bit. But the fat burning effects are still there. The anti-catabolic effects still work. And that's usually something that would be favored for contest prep for sure. GH, I mean, most people here can't afford GH or it's just bunk. So 50% of what clients probably are using it, 50% are not. It's definitely not a must. But one of the things I stress the most, more than ever these days, is sleep. Like, dude, like, I don't care if Clen's the best fat burner in the world. If you can't sleep, dude, you're not taking it. Like, period, the end. Oh, trend's great in contest prep. Okay, great, wonderful. If you can't sleep over 50 milligrams a day every other day, then you're not taking trend. Because the second your sleep deteriorates, we're going backwards. And that's going to negate the effectiveness of that drug. And that lack of sleep is going to snowball down the road. So sleep optimization and sleep schedule is number one. Stress management, number two. And 3, be consistent with me. 4, we're going to manage fatigue. 5 would be the fat burners, because I've been in this situation before where like the dude's got everything under the sun, but can't manage sleep, stress, or anything like that, and nothing's happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I try to really err on that side of what we can do with our environment and how and our perspective and staying calm and relaxed and managing stress and all that. Because I diet a lot of natural bodybuilders and I get them ripped and they don't have any of that crap.
Yeah.
So it's like when I see somebody who's enhanced and they're like, oh, it's trouble for me to get ripped. I'm like, it better not be. Like everybody has their own ability to get lean at different rates for sure. But I mean, if I'm able to get lean, natural guys in contest prep shape, then you can too. You have to manage these tools. Too many enhanced guys tend to just look at the enhancements. Well, I'll just take that drug instead. I'll just take that drug instead. If I can't sleep, I'll just take a Valium. No, you can go work with somebody else then. But like, that's kind of what I put merit to. Injectable carnitine, all that stuff. I don't do anything with it. If a client comes to me, he's like, I want to take it. I'm like, sweet dude, knock yourself out. I don't care. You know, Cardarine, that peptide, that aerobic capacity peptide, you know,
I don't think I'm familiar.
maybe I'm saying it wrong. It's for like mitochondria, aerobic capacity, helps burn energy. A lot of endurance athletes use it. Doesn't really have any thermogenic effects. That's actually pretty useful because if you have that mitochondrial energy, I could be butchering that, guys, so don't quote me on that. You have that energy and you feel good exercising, you'll move more, expend more calories, right? It's not like it's going to burn fat, but if you feel good, you're going to move more. You move more, you're going to burn more. So that's that. But I don't do anything with euhimbine either. I haven't really seen benefit. I don't seen ECA stack, like I said, sleep issues and stimulants, and they get used to that feeling of stimulation. And then if I have to cycle those stimulants out, then they crash in the middle of prep on low calories. I don't want to deal with that. So I don't really mess with any of those.
Yeah, I think what you were saying about sleep, especially in actually not even just the drug world, like even natural people, everyone's interested in drugs. And obviously, people wouldn't use them if they didn't have a utility. But so I got a CPAP last year. Nothing has changed my training more than that.
Yes.
And a lot of people were really surprised. Like my peak off-season cycle was 500 test, 300 rest. I was under a gram the end of my like music phase. And even now, like I'm not terribly higher than that, at the very, very tail end of a prep. If I have a CPAP, go to bed at the same time every night. We keep the room cold. Like sleep is literally the number one priority in our house. Because fuck, like even no matter how well you manage it, sleep gets disrupted a little bit towards the tail end. So I feel like it's something where if you're not putting a lot of effort into managing your sleep, that's the biggest low-hanging fruit I think you could have to improve your results.
110%. The first cycle of sleep is the cycle of sleep where growth hormone and other recovery hormones are released. So if you disrupt that first cycle of sleep through all these stimulants and all these drugs, your ability to recover just breaks down completely. If that breaks down completely, cortisol is going to continuously be mismanaged to a degree that affects your fat loss. Then if you're not doing that and you feel tired, people don't realize that their total NEAT decreases in the day without you even realizing it. It's like if you're energetic, I might have moved in this chair 100 times during this podcast, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm like 2 weeks out, I might be like this, not at all move. But in my head, I sat for an hour and a half, It's the same thing. It's not. So it's like, I know you may have looked at some of those studies showing that when people are very fatigued or calorie deprived, their NEAT substantially drops without them realizing it. They just fidget less.
Yeah.
So it's like, dude, you're hurt. Like you said, it's the biggest low hanging fruit. And sleep apnea machine, I got one. Game changer. Yep. I was able to grow substantially more.
Oh man, so when I did my photo shoot, the timeline's pretty similar. So I did my photo shoot last year, July 9th, and not like stage condition, but probably like 8 or 9% body fat, maybe 8% body fat. And I was 209. I'm probably closer to that 5% mark now, 218, 219. And very little changed other than, I will say, nutrition, my knowledge and my implementation of that improved a lot. But again, like the things that changed was not PEDs, it was sleep and
Right.
food.
It's funny how that works. It's like my heaviest body weight I've ever achieved at 267 at 5'9" with decent condition. I was on 600 mgs of test, 300 mgs of NBP, and 400 mgs of Primo and 4 IUs of growth. No metformin, no insulin, no AIs.
Which is
And my
relatively conservative.
right. And my sleep was great. Everything was great. I felt massive, felt strong. Appetite was wonderful. And then I look back at my previous years of working with some, idiot telling me to do this, taking twice that with shit results. Couldn't even break 240. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's not dose dependent because we keep looking at the wrong things to enhance. When if we enhance our digestion, our appetite, our recovery, and our sleep, you get way more tread to the road, way more tread.
A couple other questions I wanted to ask just before I let you go, because I know we're coming up close to an hour. Another thing commonly that you hear people talk about a lot is after somebody, finishes their competitive season, the like post-show rebound. And I'm not talking about dietary adherence and people getting fat. I mean, leveraging that low body fat percentage into potentially like a higher rate of gain. There seems to be very differing schools of thought on that. I know there's, let's say, like John's approach, which is let's bring people to maintenance. We're going to wash off as much fatigue as possible because prep is this really, stressful endeavor. And then there's other people where they take a 5 or a 6 week period of time where they crank food up, they keep gear in. So I've kind of seen both approaches, and I don't know if I've seen a consensus as to which one leads to better results. Do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I do. And I honestly think that the realm of where people think the post-show rebound is the best time to grow is the most misunderstood, incorrect fact there is. Because let's first say this. There are, the small percent of people that doesn't take a lot for them to get in shape as an effort-wise. Doesn't take a lot of drugs either to get in shape and be contest prep. It's not even a burden on the body, they can get in shape in 4 weeks and be in contest prep shape. Those people probably could rebound out of the show and stay on drugs, have good health parameters, make reasonable results because fatigue didn't really ever accumulate anything significant. Vast majority of people know. You accumulate a large level of fatigue through prep, whether you think you do or not. And then you're full of emotion, you're full of bias, and you're ready to jump back in it because you ate food and now you feel uplifted. Well, of course you feel uplifted and you think you're ready to go because you're full of emotion. You just ate food after starving yourself for 12 weeks, 16 weeks. And now you have a rebound of water because you think you're getting bigger when you're just retaining more water than normal in the blood volume. So you're like, oh my God, my pumps, I got to pump brush my teeth. This is the best time to grow. No, your body's freaking out and retaining water. And not to mention with the cortisol being high, fatigue still being high, the muscles are not really used to that level of hydration. Most people become a little hyponatremic. They don't even realize it. I know they have that water retention come on and the increase in food, but they're retaining so much fluid. A lot of times I've gotten my salt tested, my electrolytes tested post-show, and my sodium's hyponatremic. It's low. And that's why some people get cramps post-show, etc. Electrolyte balance is out of whack on a lot of people. Fatigue is there, and it's being masked by emotion and the influx of carbohydrates and sugar that excites the brain. 3, you have this dogmatic belief that because you're gaining weight so rapidly and you don't look fat yet, because like 10 days after the show, they're like, dude, look at my arms. I'm still shredded and I gained 13 pounds or 14 pounds. It's fluid, dude. Relax. You didn't gain a single lick of lean tissue in 14 days, nor did you in 6 weeks post-show. It's not going to happen. A small percent of people will, but most people it's not going to. And we have research to provide evidence of this. Then what people do is, so if they say they go that route and they shove drugs in there and they start pushing, and they're doing their rebound, they're going to get to a spot post show where their digestion has gone to complete shit. Now they actually accumulated a level of body fat, because everybody who's done a show here knows that you stay pretty damn lean for 3 to 6 weeks. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you start getting fat rapidly. And then the pumps start to decrease. And now your digestion has gone to shit. Now your appetite's down a little bit. And now guess what? It's time to come off your gear or come down to your TRT. Now you come down to your TRT in a spot where your joints hurt, you're achy, you gained a bunch of weight, your digestion's shit, your appetite's down, now you're fat. And then when you go down to your TRT, now when you finish your break, you're going to be really fat, because now you're going to have that normal body composition shift from being on TRT after having the digestion issues. And now you're going to have to back off training because your body hurt because you just gained 30 pounds in 6 weeks. Now you just ruined probably majority of your whole entire off season, versus coming out of the show, coming off gear completely for maybe 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. Or if you don't want to do that, go back onto very low dose TRT, get your blood work under control, reestablish your relationship with food, stay lean. You could probably get away with 5 to 10 pounds of body weight gain the first 10 days. And then really try to manage your fat gain. And then by the time you're 6, 8 weeks post show, being as lean as you were at like 7 weeks out would be wonderful. And then once you're 7 weeks, 8 weeks out post show, you have 7, 8 weeks post show weeks out conditioning. You've been on low gear. At that point, fatigue's gone because you've been training, deloading properly. You've been feeding the muscles with good pumps. You've been feeding the body with proper nutrition. You're lean, digestion's good, appetite's still pretty high. And now all your blood parameters are normal. And now you're ready to start your off-season push, which can last for 12 to 18 weeks. And then now you're fresh and you're lean. Body fat accumulation is inevitable when you do an off-season push, but now you're in a fresh spot versus just rebounding for 6 to 8 weeks during a time where your body's not ready to accumulate muscle tissue. And I hate to say it, guys, that crazy look you get post-show, it's not muscle, it's water. Your body's rebounding with the fluid in the blood. Your body's hyperphysiologically absorbing all the glycogen and the food and all the et cetera. And you feel massive and you feel like this is the greatest thing in the world, but it's not. It's not. For those of you listening who disagree, you'll only do that a handful of times before you realize it doesn't work. Because I've been there. A lot of people who believe what I believe in and what John Jewett says, we've been there before and we've learned. And of course, we learned my clients. But when you're in that good spot post-show, that 7 to 10 weeks after, and you've done all that and you dotted your I's and crossed your T's and you're ready to grow, now you're going to have a solid 9, 10 months of off season because now you played your cards right. Strategy over emotion. I wish people could break that dogma. I know there's so much dogma that surrounds so many methods in bodybuilding that people just get stuck on. It's like 6 weeks out, I have to start this. Oh, I heard 3 days out, I start diuretics. I'm like, you heard that 3 days out, you start diuretics. You heard. You're a different person. And every change is based on your body's response, not other people, So that's a hard thing to break with people, but I got no tolerance for it, man. It's just, I'm not doing that. I'm not going down that road and seeing people do it. It's just, they don't understand. And then as soon as they experience it, I had a client actually last year. It's a good story. I told him my plan for post. He's like, it's not the approach I want to take. And he ended up going with a pretty well-named coach that blew him up like 265 pounds. And he just got super fat. And then he got himself in a pickle. Then he was in the middle of the off season, couldn't eat anything. Appetite was poor, very excessive, poor lifts, lower back pumps, achy, painful. And we took him almost 2 months to reset his body. 2 months in the middle of our off season, which could have been building muscle, to reset his body. And then now it looks like he's going to be better this year than he was the previous year in stage, but not by a long shot. It's not like, oh my God, did you put on 30 pounds of muscle? It's like, maybe put on 5, So
I think that's the thing that's really cool about bodybuilding, or something that I really like. Because I'm definitely I'm a math guy and I'm a logic and reason guy. I think it's something actually Justin Harris talks about a lot. He actually thinking about things in first principles. So it's just if you have an understanding of the science, if you can just work things back to like what are the actual mechanisms, then you can make informed decisions that aren't based on, dogmatic bodybuilding practices or whatever else, right? Like, oh, they did this in the 80s and the 90s, and like these mass monsters did this. It's like, well, like what's actually happening at a cellular level? What's actually happening with your digestion? And let's use that to inform the decisions. And it's interesting because the people that have the most success year on year on year understand that, so we'll talk the post show rebound and setting yourself up. That sets you up for a really good off season. And then if you have a really good off season where you gain a bunch of tissue, you're reasonably lean and you don't let yourself become a fat slob. Well, if you start your prep and you're 14% body fat instead of 23% body fat, you can, reduce some, like all these things feed into each other, right? Like each stage sets up the next one, which leads to more and more success with each future phase, right? And I think people, besides the dogma, I think people get impatient and they think of each thing as its own little sprint, and not realizing that, as you said, like you first competed in what, 2005?
Yeah.
You got your pro card in 2013.
Yeah.
And like how many people like that's it's 5-10 years of competition probably for someone to be a pro, and then even longer probably for them to be a competitive pro. Like
Yeah.
these things don't happen in a single off season. So
Yeah, it's funny. It's
uh
like if people are impatient, this is the wrong sport. Like
yeah,
this isn't like let's change your grip on the bat and hit home runs next week and the next game. That's not. This is come back next year.
yeah,
This is 5 minutes on stage for a year of work.
yeah,
So if you don't, I tell people like if you don't love what you're doing, the journey and the suffering, dude, just stop. Do something else because you have to live, eat, breathe, and love the day to day of bodybuilding. Because if you're not going to be any good because nobody is world champion hating their sport of what goes
yeah.
in their sport. It's kind of like Michael Jordan. Dude, I love the games, but I hate practice and I hate free throws and I really just don't like basketball, but I love the idea of having a lot of money and being famous. Like you're never going to be famous. You're never going to be good at that particular thing. Like, the person who loves walking walks the furthest versus the person who likes destination. You know what I mean? But I'm with you, man. It's like, and what the other thing too is about the dogmatic thing. Well, people like, 80s and 90s did this. If anybody's listening and they're a coach or they have a coach or whatever, or you think like this is if you're thinking about things to change on theory, then you don't understand the process because the process is completely dictated by the response of the individual. And that's it. There's nothing else. There is no in theory. There is no, well, this program looks good. I get that. You ever get that? Hey,
Oh,
coach,
yeah,
what do you think of this training program? No
I
idea.
could care less.
But I have no idea. Well, what do you mean
Yeah,
you have no idea? You've been doing this for 20 years. Well, have you been following it? Yeah. Well, how's it working? You tell me. I don't know how it's working. You can't look at a piece of paper with exercises on it and see if it's good for you. I mean, have you been growing? I don't know what you look like before. These are all tools that they should be measuring all along of progress. But like that's where people they want to pigeonhole themselves into a black and white concept, right? Interval training's better for cardio, for fat loss than steady state. Which is better? No, there is no what is better. There's an application for a different situation. What if somebody doesn't have a lot of time and they can't do steady state cardio? You know what I'm saying? Like what if somebody just prefers and they love interval training? Well, they're going to do interval training. They love to do it because it's a good way to get them to burn calories in prep and be happy about it versus steady state. You know what I mean? Like it's all individual based on their response. That's how people need to dictate it. It's funny, man. It's like I still tell my clients too. I always like my clients to ask questions and learn. I'm not one of those coaches where it's just like, this is just strictly a professional relationship. Don't ask questions, follow it kind of thing. I have rapport with my clients. So like I'll be telling them along the way, and then they still will ask a question like, should we be doing this? I'm like, well, I don't know. So and so, is it on your plan? No. Like this is what we're doing. Like I don't know what we're doing next Tuesday. Okay. I know what we're doing now for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but I don't know what's going to happen Tuesday yet, you know?
Yeah. The training program is always a hilarious one for me too, because if it's on like it being on paper is honestly meaningless because hey, I don't know based on your leverages and your proportions what a squat looks like compared to mine. I don't know how you're executing it. I don't know what your tempo is. Like all of these things change the magnitude of that stimulus. And if I just see it typed out or written on a piece of paper, it means fuck all. Like the execution component is like I think people are getting better with that these days and not just following programs. Like there's enough people talking about execution and how important that is, but
You would think
uh, maybe I'm just listening to smarter people. I don't know.
more people do than they ever have before, but I would still say good 88% of people are not,
Yeah.
because I still get I got to bring my upper chest. So I'm going to increase my volume, increase my frequency. Well, let's look at how you're doing the movement first. And then you
Yeah.
see how they're doing the movement and you're like, no wonder you're not gaining any muscle,
Yeah.
because I don't know what that is, you know? Execution's
Yeah.
everything.
Um, so the last question I really had, I mean, I have more, but the last
We're
question I
about,
do want to touch
give
on.
me two more. You hit two more.
Perfect. So kind of along the same lines of what we've been talking about. In your time in the industry, how have you seen it change? And then what would you like to see change in the future?
This is a hard one to ask because I try to answer this unbiasedly. Because just like any, I guess you can consider I'm becoming an old timer because I'm going to be 40 in like a couple days, is that we tend to grow up during a time and favor that time versus the present time, right?
Yeah.
Um, I personally do feel, even removing my bias from it, that the direction of the sport at amateur and local level has gone bad. Um, the level of poor condition on
Mm.
stage. Um, I just, the mentality of fitness has changed. It used to be competing for that person. Now it's competing for that material aspect of what goes along with it. Look at me, where it's not as authentic. It's not real. Um, and I don't like that. I can't identify with that. So I have a lot of trouble um, with that aspect of what fitness has become. It's become taboo. I got dudes walking around the gym with no shirts on, with TikTok tripods, and videotaping themselves posing between sets and putting zero effort into exercise, not doing exercises correctly and videotaping them. Like, I don't know what that is. I don't have no part in it. And I think the overall direction of the fitness community is honestly deteriorating to a degree, not where there's not money to be made, but drug use is out of control, more out of control I've ever seen. Dudes at the local gym who don't even compete or first cycles are taking tren. It's just, that level is insanity to me. Um, Now, the other part I don't like is the cost. When I first started competing, entry to one class was $30 and a crossover fee was 20. And we got a shit ton of stage time, a shit ton. We would go out and we would do our mandatories at least 4 times, be shuffled all around, in and out, end, middle, all over the place. You had no idea who would win. And then now recently, it's just like first call out, center, move, frontal bicep, rear bicep, side chest, side tricep, front lat. All right, goodbye, later. Oh, that's $120 a class. No crossover discount. Oh, that's $200 for this. You have to get the tan here. You can't take pictures. You got to buy the tan. You got to buy the photographer. You got to use the tan. The competing's become outrageously expensive.
Dude, my
And
first show is like so $700 with all of those things built into it.
back in the day, there was no tanning service. We had to buy the bottles and do it ourselves. And then
Mm.
when there was a tanning service, you could use it or you didn't have to. Now some of these shows, you have to. Like, you have to. And then the new thing now is you can't take pictures. You can't take pictures of your cell phone. No
Yeah.
cameras allowed. You have to buy the photographer's shitty camera pictures because the photographers don't know bodybuilding angles. They're doing close-ups, washing people out. Like you only pay $50 for a washed out picture. Get out of here. Like that, I don't like. And honestly, it's starting to show in some of these shows attendance. Like
Mm.
some of the shows that in the Northeast used to have up to 400 to 500 competitors. This is a local regional show. My buddy who works some of the shows said last 2 weeks ago, there is 47 competitors. 47. Partly there's so many shows now. The other part is just it's not freaking feasible. Like, what are you going to do? To be a lawyer to be able to afford competing? It's insane. And that I don't like. What I do like, and let's talk about the positive now, not to be all negative, is there's a greater camaraderie now, right? I met you, right?
Yeah.
It's like I know a ton of people now in the industry, and I meet up with people constantly, and everybody knows who each other are, and we share a lot of information. Like this is 2004. I wouldn't be able to talk to Jewett. I wouldn't be able to become friends with them. I wouldn't be able to bounce ideas off my coach friends. I wouldn't even know they exist. So the transfer of information has gotten everybody better because you've noticed that like on a very high competitive level, the level of talent is extremely high. But you go to local level and the level of talent is extremely low.
Mm.
Where it used to be kind of like it was pretty good and it was pretty good. But now there's this separation because now that everybody can share information, every coach is getting better and better every year. These better tactics are becoming sales, coaching, ideas, books. Now people are accelerating their ability to prep people, learn and train, which is ultimately creating an overall better competitor. So at the highest level, that's what's happened to the industry and what I do like. And there's definitely more ways to make money in the industry without being sponsored. Like
Yeah.
I do very well. My wife and I do very well. We work from home. It ultimately stemmed from competing, right? And me helping people in my education. So like if I didn't bodybuild at all, I would still be a dietitian, but I probably wouldn't be working from home. I'd probably be working in the hospital still in the ICU or something, you know? So there's that positive. That's kind of like the plus and minuses. And just like I'm sure a lot of sports and things have changed that way. Everything's gotten more expensive, but that's my core. My core is really the mentality of the fitness world itself. And the general lack of respect for people who have achieved things, you know, you could be the top 5 bodybuilder in the world and you walk into a local TikTok gym and TikTok people think they're still better than you because they have more followers than you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a very strange. I don't know what's like in Canada, but near me
It's
in
the same
Texas,
thing.
very strange. Very strange.
Well, it's funny, actually. We were, again, talking about this before. I'm in the midst of launching my own like online coaching for over a decade of doing it one-on-one, which, by the way, actually, as an aside, I think is this is a crazy trend for me paying attention to it. Because to give you some background, I originally went into school. I was very academically inclined. I played sports, but I actually went in and started my undergraduate degree in engineering physics, like kind
Oh
of
wow.
yeah, I got like university math credits while I was in high school. Did a couple of years of that and hated it. And I had this thing where I remember sitting in a lecture for a computer programming class and had a moment where I went, that's what I'm going to work in a lab for the rest of my life. And I'd always loved training. Like I'd been in the gym since I was 14, originally for sport. I got up, I left, I changed all my classes to human kinetics courses, switched schools the next semester. I started as a personal trainer when I was 20 years old and just like didn't look back. So I always just loved being in the gym, both, myself training. Like selfishly, I'll always say that's the thing I love the most. And then coaching other people with the prominence of social media. And I think this is where the competing and the pro card and all this comes into play too. Every fucking person, their sister, is an online coach now. But they're an online coach for 3 months because they don't actually have the skills to be a good coach. So there's this crazy like industry that I don't even know what to call it. It's this weird thing that's happened with coaching. Um, I think like you need to actually know how to coach people in person to some, or you need to have walked the walk yourself to some degree. Like there's a level of integrity that needs to be there. But anyway, all this saying, so I'm leaving one-on-one, doing this stuff full time come September. And part of it was also I didn't want to train at a commercial gym anymore as well. So there's sort of two private local gyms in and around where I live that both have awesome equipment, like bodybuilding equipment. One of them is like the TikTok gym, and there's 37 tripods set up for people to film themselves, and it's chaos. And the other is just like in a rural community just outside of town. And Ian Valier trains there when because he's actually from the same neighborhood that I'm from. So Ian and Chris Bumstead will train at that gym if they're ever up here in Ottawa. And like there's a dozen people at most in that gym. It's quiet. They'll keep to themselves. Like, well, that's the gym I'm going to go to because I don't want 18-year-olds just filming and being in the way the whole time. I just want to go to a place where the equipment's nice and people are there because they just care about training, you know? But yeah, it's the same thing up here.
And that's one thing I want to comment on that before you ask your last question is like, I don't understand where people have the audacity to call themselves a coach or to have this distorted view that they can coach people successfully with no experience. I couldn't imagine taking an intro to one pistol shooting class and then the next day being like, hey, I'm an instructor, I'm teaching pistol class shooting. What? I don't know. I'm not an expert at pistol shooting. I'm not going to set up a class to start teach people. I'm just a beginner. Like what?
Oh,
Case in point, when I did my first show and I read those books of Aceto and came back and won, how my business started was one dude came up to me at the gym and goes, dude, you made crazy changes from last year. What did you do? And I said, well, I read these books. Do you want them? And he goes, no, but I want to pay you to help me. And I flat out said to him, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I just learned this.
hmm.
And he goes, yeah, but I want you to help me. I'm like, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. And he goes, yeah, but can I pay you to help me? And I'm like, okay, $50. Then I helped him and he did well. And then his friend goes, what did you do? Well, I hired that guy. Do you think he can help me? And that's how it started in 2006. And then from then it just was a snowball over years. But that it's dumbfounding to me but then again, people use social media to portray an image that they're not. And as you said, after 3 months, you're no longer a coach because people figure it out. But it's kind of society's responsibility in my mind to do some research first. Just like when I hire a plumber, I go on Google reviews, I ask around, I ask my neighbors who they use. I want a good plumber to come to my house. I don't just pick it up and be like, first guy in the Google search. I don't do that,
No, I'm with you completely. I mean, even making, and again, this was with a decade of experience working with clients in person. And I've probably spent between $6,000 to $10,000 a year on continuing education. Not to pat myself on the back, but like I've got a little bit of experience and knowledge when it comes to actually coaching people. And the amount of responsibility and the sense of duty that I feel to provide a really good service to each individual is immense. Like you said, I couldn't even imagine not having answers or experience and thinking I could take people's money. Like like this was a long transition because I wanted to feel like I could provide a quality service. So I guess you know what I would like that to be kind of my last question is, as somebody who works as a coach, let's say, what would you say are the key tenets for yourself to ensure that you are providing the best coaching service possible?
Never stop learning and never for a second think you know something. The second you think you know something, you quickly stop learning and everybody else is going to advance around you. The level of humility I think that is required to be the best at your craft is a level that most people don't want to feel, because most people want to attach of information, read something, think they know something, have confidence, and then speak with that authoritative figure. You know, people argue from their authoritative level. Well, I've coached five. Oh, I don't really care. Still a concept, so like never stop learning, have humility, and always think like, dude, there's people that I know that don't have half the experience as me, but I
Yeah.
have conversations with them. I like to learn. I ask questions. What did you find? What did you see? Just because they don't have the same experience as me doesn't mean that I can't learn something. Like when I took Jewett's course when it first came out, I ripped through it quickly because a lot of it's repetitive and I know, but
Yeah.
I picked up some nuggets. You know what I mean? It's like I picked up Lane Norton's books, read through them, picked up a couple nuggets for my natural guys. Like I'm like you. I'm always like reading things. I'm like hire somebody for 2 hours to go through some questions. Because there's always something to learn. There's always something that you don't know. And the
Yeah.
second, like I said, the second you think you know something, you lost. I always in my mind think I don't know enough. And that keeps my mind open to seeing what else could be there, because, when you think you know something, you stop seeing other ways of doing stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I
So
do.
like that's super important to me to keep that level of humility and understanding, and not to mention, let's be honest, learning is addicting.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's the thing that confuses me about people that like once their education's done, they just stop. It's like, dude, the best parts of life are to learn and advance, not physically as an individual, but also mentally as an individual. Like
Mm.
the more I like, the more I, the more I look, the more I realize I don't know, the more I want to know. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, it's the journey and destination conversation all over again, right?
Dude, one of the most disappointing things ever is like, it's a couple years back. And I'm a couple years back, and I had some good conditioned guys, but I was missing my conditions to my guys. I couldn't figure it out. And I had an idea of why. So I started to develop that concept in my mind. And then I hired this coach to talk to him, just like an hour session. And I started going through that, and he repeated back exactly what I said. And I'm like, damn it. Because I was hoping it was going to be something else. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
I wanted it to be some sort of like, not secret or tip, but some sort of angle I haven't seen before. But at least it was like more like you're on the right path. You just have to make a little better decisions to make that concept happen, you know? Um, yeah, dude, like that's the way that's how to do it, And people always, and the things too, I get a lot of people who hire me for a phone consult to talk about coaching and progression. How'd you get into it? How do you get better? And they're looking for like a schematic of steps to take, but it's more or less like it's the experience you gain with working with people. Like you and I could both write books on how to prep somebody, but it's not going to work the way it would if we prep somebody, because we can look at somebody and be like, I've seen these things, sequence of things happen before, and I know what to do, right? Versus somebody would be like, we're at week 4, they stalled on fat loss, so I'm going to add more cardio. I'm going to add you know what I mean? Like they're looking at it more of a like a troubleshooting sheet, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. I actually think, I don't know if you had this experience or not. Prepping your significant other is actually, I find it, I actually love it. And one of it is like when you work with a client, you're only with them so much. But with your like, I see so it's like, oh, like you're not quite the way you normally, like you're a little tired. I wonder why that is. And like you can constantly get this feedback. And I actually find the decision making um quicker and more precise. Now, there, I think you have to be able to have very good, honest dialogue between the two of you. Otherwise, it could be an absolute fucking mess. But so my girlfriend's doing a show 6 weeks after me. which thank God, because the last like 5 or 6 weeks, I can give all my attention to her and not be brain dead myself.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because we can make these reactive decisions quicker than I think I would if I didn't see this person literally all the time, right? So I find it very cool.
Well, in that aspect, yes. But if you had a personal relationship where it's like, you're taking food, putting away food from that person and they're cranky, like,
Yeah,
or you see them doing cardio and you're like, that's not really cardio. You got to up the
yeah.
pace. I'm fucking doing my cardio. Oh,
No, luckily she's awesome. Like she
yeah,
follows everything to a T. She wants to be told what to do, and she executes it. But
yeah.
um,
Some people don't have that.
yeah, true. It makes my life easier for sure.
No, but I know what you
Uh,
mean. If you like when I prep my friends
yeah,
that are close to me that I train with, dude, they're on the ball.
yeah,
On the ball. I used to prep my training partner, Sean, back in Connecticut, and I would get him so diced by like 4 weeks out, and then pull all his cardio out, and then drop his fat burners, and then just eat into the show. And it was just so smooth because I see him every day. And we come into the day and he looks dead. I'm like, bro, we're gonna train with RIR3 today. Like, you need to chill. You need to
yeah.
back off. Skip cardio, actually, and tomorrow we'll run a high day, and I can visually see him. Oh yeah, for sure, 100%.
Um, so just as we wrap up, can you let people know if they want to reach out to you, if they want to find you, where do they go to look?
All right. So my Instagram is christuttle.rd. My website is tuttlenutrition.com. My Instagram page for the Tuttle Equity is Tuttle Equity. And Tuttle Nutrition is my Instagram page for, like, you can see my clients before and afters. Again, I'm not accepting clients. I do book out, meaning like I do have clients that will inquire for a show prep and I tell them I can't take them. And then they'll tell me, well, when can I take them? And I might say, earliest I could take you might be August or September. And they'll be like, well, I want to lock you in for September. So I do that, but there's no way it's gonna be one of those things where it's like, you email me and you get to start next week. That's not gonna happen. Um, but I'm in that fortunate but unfortunate situation. I don't really want to have people work next to me. I want to do it myself. I'm just not at that. I just don't. That's not my thing. That's pretty much it. And you can check out drinkmore.com. It's my water enhancer. It comes in sweet tea and lemonade. It's calorie free, obviously gluten free. Just has a little bit of minerals to enhance that hydration ability of the fluid, but it doesn't have loaded amount of sodium, potassium, or magnesium where you have to worry about getting overconsumption. It's really to add your water to incentivize that overall hydration the entire day. It's not one of those small niche products where you're going to be using to replenish your electrolytes after an extreme 90-minute exercise session in the heat or anything like that, but for sure.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for doing this with me.